All right, good afternoon. My name is Nicole Collier. We are here with the members of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus and our friends. We are here it's a somber day for us. But I do want to take a moment before we get started to introduce those that are standing with us. We have Representative Marianne Perez. We have Representative Cheryl Cole, Chair Joe Deschatel, Representative, the Vice Chair of TLBC, Ron Reynolds. We have Representative Sean Theory, Representative Dr. Alma Allen, Representative Jasmine Crockett, Representative Barbara Gervin Hawkins, Vice Chair of Elections, Representative Jessica Gonzalez. We have Gary Bledsoe with the Texas NAACP, Representative Jarvis Johnson, and Nelson Linder with the Austin NAACP. Come on in. We have some more members of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus that will be joining us shortly. And there's Representative Tony Rose as well. So today is a somber day for us as we start to consider, this is the final push for SB7, Senate Bill 7, the so-called voter integrity bill. But this bill is anything but that. This bill is designed to deter people from exercising their constitutional right to vote. This bill is designed to limit the voice of Texans. There are so many measures in this bill that are harmful to all Texans. And, you know, I wish I could say that this is new, but this is not new. In Texas, we have repeatedly seen measures put forth that were designed to limit our voice. The whole process even of how this bill came about was riddled with irregularities. It was a fiasco. From the start, where the bill was laid out in the initial hearing room, where Representative Jessica Gonzalez and I were there, and the fact that they did not want to hear the voices of those who were not part of the committee. You know, one thing I've always heard from our senior members of the Black Caucus is that we have to make sure that we have a seat at the table. There was no seat there. And so we brought our own chair and set up. But when we got there, we realized that they still wanted to silence our voice by removing the microphone, by refusing to acknowledge my presence. But luckily, we have friends. We have friends with Representative Jessica Gonzalez, who serves on that committee. We have friends with Michelle Beckley. We had friends with John Busey. We had friends with Art Fierro, who were there to stand with us, and we stood with them. And we had that second chance to ask those questions, but they fell on deaf ears. In fact, it seemed like the fix was in from the beginning. From the beginning, there was no interest in hearing about how these measures would impact people of color. In fact, the bill got worse. So, you know, we heard confusion about what does this bill do? Well, it's not good. There's nothing in here that would increase the ballot secrecy. There's nothing in here. In fact, it gives more authority for poll watchers who are not trained, mind you, to harass voters, to follow voters, to freely roam around the polling location. It's like the old Jim Crow, where they're on your back, following you around. That's what we see in this bill. We know that we have worked tirelessly to increase voter participation, creating opportunities through Souls to the Polls. Well, they wanted to fix us and limit that and create a gap in the time so that people do not have the desire to stay until after 12 p.m. They limited the time. So now it's no voting before noon, before 1 o'clock, no voting before 1 o'clock on Sundays. Well, they know that that's something that we really fight for, and they were notified, they were advised, the Texas NAACP and myself, on behalf of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, made them aware of this problem. We made them aware of so many provisions of how they would impact curbside voting. No longer will you be able to be a good Samaritan, a good neighbor, and take your your neighbors, your senior or sick neighbors to the polls without filling out an oath of affidavit of assistance. Not only do they want you to fill out the oath, they want to know how you are planning to assist them. Are you going to just drive them, or are you going to assist them with the voting process? And I'm telling you, all the onerous provisions in this bill will just make it harder for people to exercise their right to vote. And so this bill was really targeted at what we saw done in Harris County, the amazing things done in Harris County. They had record turnout for voters, record turnout. And if that's what the purpose and goal of this legislative body is to drive turnout, voter participation, then why limit them? Why tie their hands and prevent them from doing what they think is best for their community? With the drive-through voting and the curbside voting, the 24-hour voting, there's nothing wrong because we didn't see any widespread voter fraud. In fact, they even acknowledge as Republicans that there is no widespread voter fraud. So what are you trying to address? If anything, that is to silence our voters, to silence our voice. That is the goal, even though they say otherwise. I can think of no other reason why we would need to be here continuing to fight for our constituents, other than the fact that they are trying to suppress the votes of people of color. The measures in here are directly targeted at people of color. And so we will continue to stand strong and fight till the end to make sure that our constituents, our members' voices are heard until the last moment. And so now I'd like to introduce Representative Ron Reynolds. He's going to go over a little bit more that's in this bill, and then I'll come back and talk about the procedure as well.
Thank you, Chair Collier, and all of my colleagues who stand here on the right side of history. You know, when I think about what we're doing now, I think about, and I reflect upon words of Dr. Martin Luther King when he once said that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor, it must be demanded by the, freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressed, it must be demanded. And Frederick Douglass said it this way, that power concedes nothing without a demand. We are demanding that our colleagues, and particularly the leadership who are pushing SB7, that they speak for Texans, not for the big lie perpetrated by former President Donald Trump. Because if we're honest about it, that's the reason why we're here today. We're not here, as Chair Collier stated, searching for solutions to make voting more accessible for Texans, which is a fundamental precious right. We're here to limit the voting rights that we all, many of our forefathers whose shoulders we stand on, fought so desperately for. That's what we're here. That's what we're doing today. We're attempting to justify this voter suppression bill instead of calling it what it is. This is nothing more than an attempt to keep and limit black and brown folks and the disabled community from exercising their precious constitutional right to vote, a right that was not always there for people of color. Even after the passage of the 15th Amendment, blacks and browns could not freely vote in this country. And we really thought that with the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that limited these type of similar measures that once restricted people of color from voting. So instead of now having a poll tax or a literacy test, they're instituting measures that Chair Collier just talked about. Souls to the polls. Who do you think uses that? It's black and brown communities. And they are doing it with surgical precision. What they're doing is nothing more than modern day Jim Crow 2.0. That is what they're doing. And I'm not gonna, laugh when it's not funny. I'm not gonna scratch when it doesn't itch. This is a blatant attempt to set us back. When I hear words from, former President Trump like "Make America Great Again" or "We want to take our country back," I get it. It is crystal clear with the legislative priorities that they've had this 87th legislative session, critical race theories, Are y'all paying attention? I don't want to normalize what they're attempting to do in the Texas legislature. Instead of focusing on, online voter registration and same-day registration, what are they doing? They're doing the backwards. They're taking us to a place that was a dark day in our country. And I know that our late Congresswoman Barbara Jordan and John Lewis, they're frowning down from heaven at what we're doing in this Texas legislature.
Yes, sir.
And that's why we're making good trouble. That's why we're standing together in solidarity. That's why we're speaking truth to power.
Yes.
That is why we refuse to remain silent.
Yes.
You're complicit.
Yes.
We're not going to be complicit with the Republican red meat, nothing but partisan politics, focusing on permitless carry instead of common sense gun reforms. When we see mass shooting after mass shooting, and I'm not digressing, I'm just trying to paint the picture. What are we doing in this Texas legislature? What are we doing? Instead of focusing on the pandemic and the relief for people that are suffering, we continue to lead the nation in the number of uninsured. Many of those people are black and brown people. Maybe that's why they don't care about Medicaid expansion. Maybe that's why we continue to lead the nation in the number of uninsured, because they're well off and they're well to do and they don't have to worry about insurance.
Yes, sir.
And we continue as black women to lead this nation in maternal mortality.
Yes.
And I'm sick of it. And I'm not going to even make it seem like it's not as bad as it is, because it is. When we don't speak truth to power, it's almost like we're saying, well, it's bad, but it's not really that bad. It is that bad. When we're talking about focusing on, restrictions on a woman's right to choose, the 6-week, that is so much crap, y'all. And I'm not going to continue to, I know my time is limited, but I want you all to pay attention. Elections have consequences. And if we don't stand up, we will be back to more Jim Crow. See, they do it a little bit each session. So this session, here we are peeling back, curbside voting and souls to the polls. What are they going to do next session? If we continue to let those in power continue to dictate what's happening. It's time to stand up, y'all. It's time to fight. It's time to make our voices heard. And that is what we are attempting to do. So I was supposed to talk about other stuff. I know that Gary Bledsoe can do that, but I had it all down here. But I mean, instead of focusing on minimum a livable wage, instead of focusing on things, people are still suffering. And I'm hearing back from my constituents, what the hell are y'all doing? And we're not doing anything to offer relief for people that were suffering from Winter Storm Uri. We're helping out the oil and gas companies. We're not doing anything. So I want y'all to pay attention, and I hope the media reports this. And we are going to have to elevate this message so people wake up. As the young folks say, it's time to stay woke, y'all. So I know, Madam Chair, I didn't do what I was tasked to do, but I just had to get that out, because I'm really sick and tired of being sick and tired. Too many people fought and literally died for the precious fundamental right that we have to vote, and here we are today, relitigating voter suppression 2.0 in 2021. We're not talking about the 50s. We're talking about 2021. We don't live in a post-racial America. We live in an America where we're trying to whitewash many of the things that we did, so we don't have to face the truth. And that is what we're doing today. So thank you all. I apologize for getting off a message. Thank you.
All right. That's all right. We'll hear from Gary Bledsoe with the Texas NAACP next.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank all the members of the caucus and the Mexican-American caucus, the Democratic caucus that have fought so hard to fight against these horrible bills. Let me say, first of all, what is the purpose behind the bill? The purpose behind the bill is that there were 49.4% of Texans who were adults that were African-American and Latino in 2010. Since that time, 67% of Texas growth has been African American and Latino. Texas is becoming, it's already a majority minority state, okay? It's becoming increasingly so. So what is at stake here is there is an attempt to make this into an apartheid state, to make sure that a small minority of conservative extreme white citizens can dominate our government. Yes, sir. So that is why we are where we are. That's why. Let me say, number two, that one thing I want everyone to understand is that the decisions that were made here in this bill were made by white people. Yes, okay? They excluded the minorities from the House side from the decision-making process. They ran an ad hoc process where the white folks could talk to the white folks and make the decisions. Okay? So what this means is they have subjugated the legislative process to a decision made in the back room by people that don't include us. That's completely inappropriate. Now, they've done this with surgical precision. One of the senators on the committee used to be the voter registrar in Harris County, Paul Betancourt. And he has a history of having issues with the African American community in terms of the handling of that office. And things that are very consistent with what occurred while he was a voter registrar are in this bill today. And so let's see what they did. Okay. What they did is they went through every single part of the process to try to dislodge African American Latino voters. They did it up front by going after our community groups with the new cause of action, trying to make it into some kind of RICO-type crime to get organized and to go in and try to get people to vote for certain individuals. So they sought to lock that out in the bill. They also, in the advance process, have made it more difficult to register to vote. And we know that was one of the issues that Senator Betancourt had when he was a registrar in Harris County. And so now they're going to be able to disqualify more voters and refer those voters, when they don't somehow qualify, over for people to scrutinize and open up investigations into them, maybe about there's some potential problems. It'll have the chilling effect on people wanting to actually register to vote. Also, ahead of time and before the actual vote, what they've done is they've limited early voting. And the limit on the time of early voting is clearly designed to limit African American voting. Okay, because African Americans are the ones that vote on Sundays. Everyone knows about our souls to the polls. So that's being lopped out. The other thing that's being lopped out is anti-African American and Latino is the expanded hours that are no longer there. They took out the expanded hours. So if you're a working person, you work a night shift, you work in the medical community, you can no longer vote late, okay? So those issues are very clear. What else have they done? They've created all these criminal laws that are intended to convict you. What did they do? The House version that these folks here so ably negotiated that at least reduced these offenses down to misdemeanors were brought back up to felonies. So what are they trying to do? They're trying to disqualify people from voting with felony convictions, and they're trying to take out African American voting officials so they can't be part of the process. Okay? So that's another intimidation tactic they use that goes before the actual vote. Now, when it comes to the actual vote, what's actually occurring? Okay, they've empowered these vigilante forces that we've had incredible experience with, these poll watchers that go into our communities and disrespect our election officials. They've exalted them to where they're above the actual election judges. These folks here had ably negotiated a compromise that allowed the election judge to have the kind of authority they've always had under Texas law and to evict someone who's problematic in the polls. They took that out. They took that out. And I want you to understand, and you saw the discussion over in the Senate last night, where they talked about whether or not you could actually see how someone votes. All they could say is it doesn't allow you to do that. But I defy you to find a provision in this law that says that you can't see how a person votes. It said you can see everything they can do. You can follow up to the place where they're voting. And it's an offense to stand in their way where they can't see. So the only limitation that had been in the law related to whether or not you could videotape. Okay? So now they've empowered the poll watchers. They've empowered the poll watchers to act as vigilantes in the community and basically take over. We had a horrible experience with them this past time. Now, also what they've done, they've created these incredible impediments to voting, where some of the oaths that they're required to take are unreasonable, something that people wouldn't know. You know, I don't know if somebody is truly disabled. I just know what I see. But there are trick games that are involved in this to get people into a very difficult and problematic circumstance. So this bill has so much more. Even to the counting of the ballots. They go to after the election, where they make it easier for judges to overturn election contests. They expand venue so you can have venue in more locations. They try to quicken the process if somehow someone they don't like actually wins to where an appellate court can overturn them. They invade themselves into the judicial province, violate the separation of powers under the Texas Constitution. This is a clear, raw take about taking power and putting minorities in their place where they can never share power in Texas. But you can be rest assured that we're not going to take that sitting down.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I know that Vice Chair, we have Representative Armando Wally's here as well. Vice Chair Jessica Gonzalez. We'll take a few questions right now at this time. Are there any questions?
When do you expect this to come up on the House floor?
It's eligible today at 4:50.
At 4:50?
Yes.
So that's when it's going to be?
I don't know. It's eligible at 4:50.
I wanted to put it to the room. Was anyone here, any members of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, anyone representing the NAACP, consulted specifically in the crafting of this conference committee?
Well, you mean consulted? Where they? I was a member of the conference committee. So yes, I was there. We did make recommendations of how we felt the bill should flow and what provisions should be in it and should not be in it. But the majority of our recommendations, I'd say over 90%, were rejected.
What do you regard as some of the most crucial that didn't make it?
Well, of course, being able to have a poll watcher removed. You know, there's nothing in here that says that the presiding judge can have that poll watcher removed if they breach the peace or violate a section of the election code. That was in one of the versions that we saw. Now, this is another thing. There were so many reiterations of this bill. I mean, I saw multiple forms of it, and it kept changing. It evolved. And so you have to try to keep up with that. And so, you know, from day to day, it was a different version. In fact, on the last day, I got 2 versions of this particular measure and was not provided the additional time that I asked to consider it. Instead, they just immediately sent in the conference committee report. And so, you know, there was no opportunity, no meaningful opportunity to provide feedback and negotiate this particular document. It was more of, this is the bill that we've worked out with the Senate. These are the things that are required, and we're going to run with it.
What do you make of the Senate's decision to take this up overnight?
That's unfortunate, and it seems like a clear violation of the Constitution.
What's your strategy now? Do you see any avenues that you can?
Well, you see, we brought the thunder today. We brought the thunder. Everybody's on fire. You know, the thing is elections matter. Elections have consequences. We need our voters out there to vote. You see this happening here, it's happening in your communities. You've got to stand up and vote. You've got to exercise your right to vote. And so that's why we need to make sure that more people who share our values are out there voting and are in the polling locations. I mean, literally, this bill also deters people from participating in the election process. It's already hard to get people to serve as presiding judges, election clerks. Now that you can criminalize simple mistakes, it's going to be even harder.
But do you see any, I mean, is there any hope from your side in stopping this bill?
We remain hopeful always. Any other questions?
Are there any strategies or tactics, point of orders, anything like that y'all are planning to employ in order to potentially derail the bill?
Please stay tuned.